Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja. Now, normally, what we do in California is we send all of our people to Texas. But this evening, they sent one to us. We're going to be joined this evening by Dwayne Stovall. He's a former candidate for US Senate in the state of Texas. He's the founder of GetOfMyState.com, and he educates people generally about the way the country should run. And he's hoping that people will bring him to office to help him do it. Dwayne, thanks for coming.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about why you're here. What's this Get Off My State thing all about?
The fundamental principle of Get Off My State is to spread the understanding of federalism, which is the original construct of the government system that we're supposed to be living under. Today we suffer from what would be called nationalism. And instead of having a federal system in which the states would retain most of the authority, or as Madison said, the states would have powers that were numerous and indefinite, and the federal government was to have powers that were few and defined. Today it's flipped on its head, and we have more of a national system in which all of the power is held in the center. Most people don't really have a clear understanding of the federal system as it was offered, and that's the basis of the Get Off My State initiative that we started in 2014, the end of 2013. There's numerous presentations we do, but I'm out here talking to the Conservative Forum tonight about, you know, the general construct of federalism and a lot of known mechanisms that are still in the Constitution for us to use to try and rein in a federal government that's basically out of control these days.
Well, so the challenge that we run into, though, if we're trying to talk about federalism, like you said, people not understanding what it is or why it hurts. They know that things are broken. They can't put their finger on why. They feel like they might be losing some control locally or regionally or at a state level, but they want that control to be brought back by giving power to the federal government to come in and fix the things that are broken locally. Isn't that where we get into the problem?
It tends to go that direction these days. Right. We are waiting for those in offices of the federal government to give back authorities that have been taken over the course of the last 150 years. And it's much like asking the bully who takes your money every day for lunch to make a decision on their own to stop taking your money every day. So
that's an interesting analogy. Yeah. Taking the money from people and not giving it back.
Yeah, they don't return power once they've taken it. That's a historical fact. There's nowhere you can go back in time and see where the federal government has ever done anything to actually reduce the size and scope of the government. As a matter of fact, if you were to graph the behavior of our Congress or the government in general over the course of the last century, you'd see that the size and scope of the government continues to increase without fail. There's slowing patterns, but it's always increasing. The size of the debt increases. The amount they spend increases. Really, the only thing that decreases in the course of the last century is individual liberty.
Yeah, well, but you have to trade some of your liberty in order to be safe, right?
Yeah, I'm that Texan who says not no, but hell no. We don't do that. So don't take 1 ounce of my freedom. I actually, you said former candidate. I've run for office really under the premise that I want to be left alone. Right. And I know for a fact they're never going to leave me alone. So if they're not going to leave me alone, I'm going to go ahead and get in the race and possibly get a hold of that government by the throat a little bit.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, I'm a recovering politician too. I understand that whether you win or you lose, part of the way that our system is designed by allowing us to run is that you get a platform. You get to expand the conversation. You get to bring up topics that they may not be paying attention to.
Oh, absolutely.
And so in other cases, if you were doing that on a street corner, they'd think you were nuts. As a politician, it's completely acceptable and expected, right?
And interesting, everybody's lives turn in a certain way, and you don't realize you're being developed during a portion of your life for a later point. When I decided at the kitchen table to run for an office that's as prestigious as US Senate, as an absolute nobody in the state of Texas, which has got 29 million people, it's crazy to do that. It's crazy to even think that. But the fact is, you get into the race. I spent 12, 13 months up to the primary, and what I learned was that so many of us know so little about the construct of the Constitution, the relationship between the states and the federal, and the office, what the U.S. Senator is supposed to actually do, that by the time I got to the primary, I had already started Get Off My State, because that was so important that we need to get this re-understanding, this re-education going, and it's been very, very successful. I've spoken to about 30,000 Texans over the last 4 years.
So there are two things I want to know. One is, what was the original spark that made you even think of the craziness of running for office? Because it takes a special individual.
Craziness is a great descriptor.
You have to be slightly off to run for office.
When your government, our government, the federal government, when they have decided that it is within their power to collect all of your personal private information, to give agents of that government the authority to write their own warrants to come into your home, to do all of these things that are completely adverse to the constitutional protections that are supposed to be there. The individual that I was running against there in Texas, who not only voted for all these types of behaviors for more than a decade prior to me running, he heralded them as very important and for your security and for your safety, going back to what you said earlier. There's a point in time where you just go, you can't do this anymore. I like the idea of earning what I earn, keeping what I earn, participating in charity where my heart calls me to do so. I am not the guy that wants a nanny or an individual who sits in an office 1,000 miles to my east to dictate to me what I'm going to do with my money.
Right.
Now, taxation is one thing, and there are certain things that people have basically been able to justify through taxation, but there are portions of taxation in this country where they take people like me, people of faith, and they say, you don't have a choice, we're going to take your money and we're going to make you a business partner in an industry that kills babies and sells their body parts. No, I'm not going to sit at home and go, well, okay, you know, that's fine.
Right.
No, it's not fine.
Right.
And I'm just that guy. I'm not willing to go along with that. So that all initiated out of the watching his behavior in office, in particular him. So
him being the former president.
No. Him being John Cornyn in Texas, watching his behavior in office and him voting for very specific bills that are anti-liberty, anti-constitutional. There's never been a bill, barring one during an election cycle. Which election cycle, all things are off. They create avenues for their guys to vote against, vote for conservative concerns so they can go back home and say, look what I did. Yeah. But generally speaking, we have faux Republicans, phony Republicans, or what we call big R Republicans, or big government progressive Republicans. And what they want to do is grow the government as large as possible because they're just smarter than you are. Right. When I'm in Texas talking to some of the most wealthy individuals in a grouping of 100 in West Texas, and they are very well-to-do. They own their own ranches, they got their own agriculture, they're in the oil field, and they think they're pretty well set. And I explained to them, and by this particular meeting I'm recalling, there was a congressman there, and he was very unsettled, let's put it that way. And you explain
people were
to them,
sharpening knives and pitchforks and things.
You explain to them, you feel very comfortable in your skin because you feel like you've accomplished something and you're well-to-do and you've got a little wealth. What you need to understand is that you have 535 individuals to your east who simply think you're too stupid to manage your own life. Right. That's where we live. Right. And when you back up, whether I'm talking to students or whether I'm talking to adults, when you get into the scale of this issue and you understand that it is insanity to believe that 546 individuals, which is all the branches together, should have the authority to rule over the daily lives of 320 million plus citizens. That's not a federal system. That's not a constitutionally limited government. That is an unlimited national authority. And at this point today, we've relegated ourselves to the states being nothing more than counties. We live in the United States of America, and I live in the county of Texas. You just happen to live in the county of California. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people end up buying into the idea. They don't think they personally are not smart enough. They just think everyone around them must not be smart enough. That's why these guys are in office. I don't know, the psychology. Guys meaning female and male. The psychology behind all of this is so strange to me, because if I walk into, it's kind of like that, well, you only have an 11% approval rating of Congress, but my guy is going to get reelected because he's all right. Right. Well, no. 99% of them are awful.
Right.
They're just awful.
Right.
And they disappear from you, and you'll never know who they are. We have no context of who these people are. They get elected. We've never met them. They go 1,000 miles to our east. In your case, 2,500 miles to your east. And we don't know who takes them to lunch, who they break bread with, who they answer to, who they're influenced by, but it's not us. Mm-hmm. But they come back every few years with a multi-million-dollar ad campaign telling you they're just like you. Mm-hmm. And they're lying through their teeth. And we know they are. But, you know, if they show up at one event over the course of 6 years and they shake your hand, they're your buddy. Mm-hmm. But the psychology there is just amazing to me. I can walk into a room, whether it be a GOP group or a college students or a Tea Party group or a Liberty organization or a church organization or whatever, and before the judges got involved, I could say, aren't you ready for the Supreme Court to get off their duff and say that marriage is between a man and a woman? And the whole room will always, I've done this hundreds of times, erupt in applause. Mm-hmm. And I wait till they're finished and I go, okay, now somebody get out your pocket Constitution, show me where they have the authority to define marriage. Well, you know, well, they really don't. Well, no, they don't. And when you do that, that makes you no different than the most progressive left-winger you can find. Because what you're doing is exactly what they do. You're saying, I'm going to quote Jefferson, I'm going to hold up my Constitution, and I'm going to tell you I want fidelity to the Constitution, I want a limited government, except that when it involves marriage, I want the government to go do things it doesn't have the power to do and grow it. Right. So there's a conflict and a contradiction in all the parties.
Sure, it is.
Right, and it's for me, it comes down to you have to understand where the authority lies, and it doesn't lie with those few people to the east. It doesn't lie with them.
Exactly, and it goes, and to your point, I mean, you look at the executive orders. The more liberally minded citizenry loved when Obama was doing it. Sure. And then the other side didn't like it so much. Then when Trump did it, then now the thing is flipped. Because people don't realize when you cede power to the government, just because your team is winning now, doesn't mean that bat won't be used against you next time.
Who's going to have that power next time?
Right.
It's insanity. It really is. It's a social dynamic today in which if you went back 15 years, you would have a rightful, truthful position from the liberal left who hated the warfare. Hated it. You're just a warmonger. They went after Bush. But when Bush got out and Obama basically carried on the exact same formula, all of a sudden they went quiet. Right. Then all of a sudden Republicans went, we don't have a declaration of war, we're not following the Constitution.
Right.
It's this Red Sox versus Yankees, R versus D kind of thing, is that paradigm is just killing us.
Well, and
I'm a lifelong Republican.
Right. But people just don't understand that that it can be used against you.
Sure, right? Sure, it can.
And so you've run for office before, you're a repeat offender, you're going to do it again.
Right, I'm dumb enough to do it again. Absolutely.
Not happening. So, I mean, what are you hoping to accomplish in your run? I mean, you want to get elected, you want to educate people about what a senator does. That was the other question, is what does a senator do in your
U.S.
definition?
senators, it's not my definition. It's the definition of people like Roger Sherman and George Mason in the founding of this country. They designed the Senate with a very specific purpose. George Mason referred to the Senate as a mechanism of self-defense for the states. The whole reason the state legislatures were allowed to pick their own U.S. senators was because it gave them control over their senators. If they didn't like what was being done in D.C., they could simply tell their senators to pack your stuff and come home. We're not doing that.
So they weren't elected by a popular vote? Right. Is that what you're saying?
A lot of people are confused. I would say 90% plus, and I don't have any empirical data to back that up. This is just my own experience. We are bought and sold into the idea that actually was pushed by federal government offices in the early 20th century. They pushed this notion that you have to be able to elect them personally. You have to be able to vote for them. That we are the checks. Well, in a state like Texas or California, you've got over 30 million people. The idea that voters, a general popular vote over 30 million people for a U.S. Senate position is going to create the results of a legitimate, well thought out, context of character individual that we want to put in office, that's crazy. It can't happen. data, numbers happen. You can't do it.
Right.
So I run for office, and the reason I have such a high, what we call a retention rate, I ran with very little money in the first race. I only spent $70,000 in a state as large as Texas, but I pulled almost 11% of the primary. The reason was people heard how it's supposed to operate, and they got it.
Right.
And I've been doing this now, explaining the origins of that position now through Get Off My State for going on 4 years now. And it's very, very successful, and people get it. What would shock people is that if you did the job correctly, how many legislators are there in the state legislature, and how many reps are there in the state of California's legislature?
Somewhere between 52 and 55 is.
That's it, that few?
For in the state legislature?
In the state legislature?
Yeah, for the assembly,
wow.
yeah.
You got 50 some odd people representing over 30 million people? Okay, that's a problem, but we'll carry on to what I was getting at. You have a much better chance of reaching your state representative, even in that ratio here in California,
right,
than you would ever have of trying to reach your U.S. Senator.
Absolutely.
Ever. So the way it should work is your U.S. Senator should shut down all those field offices they have, which is what I would do in Texas. I think John Cornyn has 8 of them there. I would shut down them all. Go to the state capitol, ask the state lieutenant governor and the governor to find me a cubbyhole at the capitol, and then put me a phone line in it and one computer, and I'll put somebody in that office. And then we're going to have a speed dial and a text number and an email list with all the 150 legislators in the state capitol in Texas and the reps. And if anyone in the state of Texas has an issue with what's going on at the federal level in the Senate, they can pick up their phone and call their state representative, and they are 1 degree away from getting that message to me. Once they learn that that's how it's supposed to work, what they have a hard time with, they get it. What they have a hard time with is that U.S. senators are basically overpaid gophers. They're supposed to represent the best interests of their state. They don't represent individuals, and people are confused that way.
Right.
And everybody understands the 17th Amendment created this popularly elected.
Not everyone understands that. They think it's always been this way.
Right. Well, that's true. That's true. We run into that too. But the 17th Amendment, which made that position no longer part of the state control, it made it a popularly elected position. What a lot of people don't understand is, or most of us don't understand, I didn't until about 10 years ago, it actually destroyed the bicameral system that we were gifted. The idea that we have a House of Representatives, which is the people's house, and the idea that we have a Senate, which is the state representation, that all went away. And now we have basically a 535-member parliament, and the only difference between them is varying terms, because they're all popularly elected. So we get these feigned kind of arguments, these big battles in Washington, D.C., where they put up the R and the D and they fight with each other. But ultimately, they work together to grow their power. So I tell everybody all the time, it's a two-party system. It's those inside the Beltway and the rest of us. We're out here arguing with each other over things that have nothing to do with them, begging them to take control over these things, and they're eating it up. Right. And we need to divest them as far away from our issues as we can and get it as close to home as we can.
And I agree. And it goes back to the whole bully taking the money thing.
Exactly.
People wonder why they have the problems, because they don't have the money to fix them, because all the money left in taxes and went somewhere else, and they take their slices and it never comes back. So
yeah, and I don't take bullies very well.
No, I resemble that remark.
Well, it's been very, very interesting. It's enlightening to see people when the message sinks in and they get it, because it's not hard. We fight against a lifetime of training. We train ourselves from this big till we're grown for generations now, that the Supreme Court's the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. No, it's really not. And when people figure out that it really only has 3 types of cases they have original jurisdiction over, they figure out that the Congress controls the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary as a whole, they become very angry. I've experienced it. I like that. They need to figure that out.
But the thing is even in our lifetimes, even within the last 5 to 10 years, the Supreme Court's had the ability to change their job description in front of our very eyes, and very few people protested.
Well, no, because we want them to. We don't agree with their outcomes. Half don't agree, half do agree. But what I'm trying to get across to everybody is that 95% of their outcomes are none of their business.
Right. Well, same with Congress, same with...
But Congress, I ask generalized questions. I'll ask somebody, what's Article 1 written about? And they'll tell you. You can get in front of students. Article 1's written for the legislature, the legislative branch. Well, who's Article 2 written for? Well, it's written for the executive branch, the president. Of course. Well, who's Article 3 written for? Oh, that's written for the judiciary. No, it's not. It was written for Congress. There wasn't even a judiciary when they wrote it. It's written for Congress. It's the rules of Congress. Congress controls the judiciary. Why don't they do that? I can't answer that question. But I can tell you, if you get people who understand the authority, be it me or anybody else, who's willing to pose the argument, you can change this dynamic. You can go ahead and put the authority back in your state Supreme Courts where it belongs. You can start divesting that power away from that federal. It's still there. We can do that.
Right, right. So, I mean, coming from Texas, and I've joked with you before the show that we've Californicated Texas at every opportunity. I mean, we're sending our people there to ruin your state.
We're taking up funds for another wall.
Another wall. Now we have to build one from the west as well as on the south.
Red River. We've got the
So, I mean, what advice would you have for Californians who want to get politicians off their state too? I mean, is it just educating themselves about federalism? Is there something else that you think is the silver bullet?
I don't think there's a silver bullet.
Okay.
So I'm not that guy. I don't think there's going to be a rosy sunrise and we're all going to fix everything and it'll be great. I think that there are naturally occurring social happenings that are historically proven, and it takes place. I think if you, I fight, and fight's an interesting word, I'm in the battle for limiting the federal government and trying to rein it in and bind it down by the chains of the Constitution, so to speak, because it just needs to be done.
Right.
Not because I believe we're going to win it or there's a winning in the process. I think that if you have an issue in your state, then you owe it to yourself and your family and your kids and everybody. And I know it's all hokey about the kids thing, but you owe it to everyone around you, including yourself, to go ahead and get involved and try to affect the change that's necessary. Growing the government, taking the fruits of your labor, having a government that is completely all involved in your daily life, that is the complete adverse of what was gifted to us out of Philadelphia and what the states agreed to. You could not have a more differing governmental system than we have today from what they gave us. So it sounds like the two-step process is get educated and then get involved. Absolutely.
And get involved can take a number of different steps, right? It can be running for office. Not everybody's willing to be the face and take the arrows and the swords and bullets and things that could come your way. But they can support lunatics who'll do it.
Right.
Working on the campaigns or doing a number of other things to help make sure that they get elected.
It's a tough one. If you're not going to be the person who gets out in front and puts your body, your family, and everybody else in harm's way, so to speak, the least you could do is use the resources you have. If you have candidates in California that you like, put your money where your mouth is. If you have skills, volunteer for those candidates, work for them, do whatever it is you can do to try and advance that message. I am a limited government guy. When people ask me, because we live by labels, I hate labels, but we live by them. So to communicate, you understand that well. You have to use them. And I have people ask me all the time, so what are you? You're a Republican? You're conservative? I am a little r Republican with Jeffersonian principles.
And I'm complicated.
And they
research me.
and they look at me and they go, what is that?
Yeah.
Well, if you understand that governments are supposed to be limited constitutionally, that they're only supposed to spend what is absolutely necessary, they are supposed to protect liberty at all costs. They're not supposed to put future generations who have yet to be born in debt. Then you understand the Jeffersonian principles. That's basic. And what we're doing today is evil.
And so we are out of time, Dwayne, but if people want more information, they can look you up at DwayneStovall.com.
DwayneStovall.com leads to my campaign issues. You can go to GetOfMyState.com and email me through there. If you want to have a presentation, we do presentations all over the country. Awesome. I'd be glad to respond. It goes directly to me. There's not a large staff of anybody. This is a...
You brought your own studio audience. Don't joke with me. I know you've got support.
Yes, I have some dear supporters.
Well, we do have to take a break, and we thank you for joining us, Dwayne, but if you hold on, we'll be right back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
Welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. We appreciate them tremendously because they've made this show possible for what is now the 6th season, and without them, I'd be somewhere else by myself and not with you. So we thank them for this tremendously. But what they're best known for is their speaker series. And Dwayne was visiting with us this evening because he will be there this evening at around 7 o'clock at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stearland Road, just about 3 minutes from here in Mountain View. And he'll be speaking about Get Off My State and some of the education that he leads people through. In September, Larry Greenfield, a conservative thinker and leader with the Claremont Institute for the Study of Statesmanship and Political Philosophy, will be there. They're based in Southern California. In October, Jonah Goldberg, who's a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a senior editor at National Review, he'll be there. He's a best-selling author. He's a nationally syndicated columnist, and he'll have lots to share that will enlighten and entertain, I'm sure. But for more information on the forum, you can reach out at theconservativeforum.com and find out about starts of events, etc. In closing tonight, I think Dwayne brought up a lot of important points. One is that we've gotten extremely far away from the original design of the Constitution and the protections that were put in place to really give voice to the states at a level where we've lost a lot of the control. A lot of the things that should be going at a local level have been relegated and delegated to federal offices that have no understanding or control, should have no control over what we're doing locally. So look him up at DwayneStovall.com. Learn more about that, but also learn more about federalism and get educated on that and get involved. I've been your host this evening, Chris Pareja. This has been The Right Side, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person or on the show sometime soon. But if you just can't wait, reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com. Thanks, and have a great night.